All right, welcome back. So we want to talk about um, WebSocket acknowledgement, basically. They call it the ACKs. So the way this work, it's more of when a client tries to reconnect to a client, it basically, is able to get access to all the previous messages that client must have missed due to bad network or loss of connectivity, basically. Right, so I'm just going to show you a demo that would explain more of how that should work, and then we're going to move more into the architectural diagram of how of how we piece it out together on the back office. Right. So this is a quiz delivery system, just a basic app. So I'm going to join as a client. I'm not going to supply the client's ID. I'm just going to join the quiz. Right. So immediately I join the quiz, I still have some very like dummy things. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to clear out all of these things. Right. So let's go here quickly, and then we're going to clear it out from there. So we have it here. So let's clear out the whole thing. Right. Questions. We do the same thing for the questions. Delete the whole thing. Right. And fine. We should be good. So now let's refresh again and join the quiz. Okay, so you can see we're starting all the way from scratch. So this client is connected, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to make a different client, right? To make it like, multiple clients. So I'm just going to duplicate this. This is different client. I'm going to put them side by side. So it's a bit accessible, right? And I'm going to connect this other client. So check the client's ID. So it's different. This one ends with 01 and this one ends with 85, right? And of course, we have the simulate offline button. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open up the admin portal. And this one, we're going to start adding questions, right? So here we're going to say, what is Python, for example, right? And we can say, hey, Python is a language. You can say B. All right, so we basically have a question, which is what is Python, and then we have our options, right? So check it out. Mainly, I add this question, it gets broadcasted to both our clients, right? So if we have like thousands of clients and all of that, it's going to get broadcasted at the same time to our different clients, right? So these two clients, they basically have access to this question. And here's the beauty. So let's say client B goes offline, maybe it's having some network connectivity issue, and I have a button here to simulate offline. I'll just click on that. You can see client B is disconnected, right? So admin is going to post a different question, right? So this is what is a build. I have an option here. If there is an there is a programming language. So I'm going to broadcast this, right? And as you know, client B is connected, but client A is still here, right? So client A gets to see the message and client B doesn't get it, right? So here is where the beauty of acknowledgement comes into the picture, right? Immediately client B reconnects, no matter how long, right? It could be days or whatever. Immediately reconnects, is going to get access to the question he just missed. Right. So this makes it stay up to date at every point in time. So that reconciliation is always there. Merely is online, it gets to see, the missed out questions and all of that. So this is very important, when we're talking about WebSocket, because you don't want your clients to miss any messages, as the case may be, right? So they are always, getting to see the core message at all times, right? So let's take a look at the architectural diagram. Okay, so one of the part I've not explained has to do with when you reload, right? So for example, you have like a new client, right? So let's say we want to add it in a new client. Let's duplicate this. This is a new client. I'm going to join the quiz, right? I'm going to join this. This is my client ID 68. It's a new client. You can see new client basically get access to all the messages, which is fine, right? But existing clients that have lost connection without refreshing can basically get, you know, basically get the up to date message, when they get reconnected back, when they have the internet backup, right? So hope that makes sense, right? So this is the whole concept of acknowledgement, right? Because at the end of the day, the client is just basically acknowledging that, oh, I've received this message. He sent that back to the server. The server just records it, basically. So with that explained, I'm going to show you guys how we tailor all of these things together, in the architectural side of things, right? So here I have this little diagram here to explain it. So we have different entities. So here from my sample, we have the admin panel. This is where we are posting the questions. We have the server itself. This is the backend server. And then we have the MongoDB. That's our DB that we're saving to. And then from our example, we have two clients, client A and client B. Right. So what happens is that admin will add a question, right? Admin posts the questions, and this basically make a post request to the slash questions endpoint, right? So this question is saved over to MongoDB like this, and also the question is saved with a unique sequence number, right? Preferably numeric. You can start with 0, 1, and so on, right? So that it becomes incremental as we go on, right? So that question is saved, the unique sequence ID, right, over to MongoDB. So what will happen is that the server will now emit a message over to the client A, which is connected with a question and the sequence number, and it will emit it to client B as well with a question and the sequence number. So that's to say that if we have like 1,000 clients, the server is going to emit the question as well as alongside the sequence number to all the available clients connected to our server, right? Does that make sense? All right. So once we have all of those, the next thing that we do is that I've already explained. When it gets to client A or client B or any of the clients, as the case may be, they just render the question, right? They show the question, just like what we're doing here. We show the question, immediately it gets to the client, right? So immediately we display the question. What the client does, the client has one extra responsibility by emitting an event back to the server, like this. It emits the event back to the server and say, "Oh, server, I've acknowledged this question. Here's the sequence I have acknowledged." And what the server does is that it saves that, right? So the server is like, "Okay, client one or client A, know that you've basically acknowledged this particular sequence number. Here is me. I'm going to save it. And for future reference, just in case you refresh, you still have up to date data, right?" So the server goes ahead to basically record the ACK. Remember, ACK means acknowledgement. So you're just acknowledging, the sequence, right? So basically, it saves it over to MongoDB, right? And then you're good. So same thing applies to client B. It displays the question. You emit back to your server and say, "Okay, I acknowledge this." Going to the fact that the client is online, so acknowledge the message. And what the server does is saves it to the MongoDB for persistency. Basically, to persist it. So now that's the simple part, right? That's the when both clients are connected. But what happens when some of the clients are not connected, which is very realistic because um, in real world, all the clients might not be connected at the same time, right? Even when they are connected, they have some network connectivity issues, they may have some other issues that just put them offline for some time, right? So this is the part that we want to explain, which has to do with trying to reconnect a client back to an active session, right? So immediately a client gets connected, what will happen is that for a client to be connected, it makes a request back to the slash reconcile endpoint, right? So you can see this endpoint is slash reconcile. It goes ahead with the client ID, and this is the last sequence. This here is telling the server that, okay, hi server, I am client A. And the last sequence that I acknowledged is sequence number 2, right? So if I'm missing out on any other sequence, please, save those, send those over to me, and then I'll render those, right? Basically. So it mainly calls this. We have a function eternally, which we use to like get reconcile questions, for the client and the sequence number, right? Mainly we, basically call that the server calls that from the MongoDB side of things, and the MongoDB will just, supply do its filtering and bring out every other sequence that is greater than. So remember, I told you that the sequence is meant to be saved, preferably in numerical terms, so it can be incremental, right? So server returns back, sorry, the MongoDB returns back all of the sequences, greater than the last sequence, right? So mainly we have that you can say the server basically send it back over to the client with all the questions that have been missed. And then what happens is that the client basically said, okay, I've acknowledged all of this and send it back to the server. And the server says, okay, since you've acknowledged, it basically records it and then saves it back to MongoDB, right? So whereas the client basically have access to the question, right? So this document might be a bit technical for some people, but let me explain it. It's very simple, right? So immediately a message is sent from the server to the client. The client will emit an event back to the server to say, okay, I've acknowledged this message, meaning that I've received this message, right? Immediately that gets to the server saves it in any DB, it could be Redis, it could be MongoDB, Postgres, and so on, right? Saves it over to the DB just for, just for future sake, right? For references, right? So, and immediately it does that, the front end can basically like render the actual message that the server, that the client must have missed, right? So, I think with that basically explains it at the top level. We can move on now to the code on how we're able to basically, implement it. So I'm going to go over here, right? So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to go here, index. So this is the entry point of the application. So it's a very basic Express application. So here you can see we are doing our connection, the way you connect to WebSocket, and here we basically have like the app itself, right? So this is where we are creating the WebSocket app. This is the HTTP itself. So this is where we're creating the Express app. This is where we're creating the WebSocket 7, right? And please take note of this. This is very important. It's very crucial to achieve what we're doing. So how does the client knows that, the user has been reconnected, right? So socket basically have what we call the ping interval, right? So socket basically from here, this is specified in milliseconds, 1 to the 500 milliseconds, meaning 1.5 seconds, right? So this is actually the amount of time it takes for the socket to ping to say, okay, am I still alive? It pings again to say, okay, maybe it gets a successful response. That means the socket connection is alive, right? So, and also we have the ping timeout. Ping timeout means that, okay, I've tried for a number of times, and if I'm not getting any feedback, I'm just going to time out, right? So you have your time in there. So here, these are our available methods. We have the connection, we have the ACK, the event we emit to the ACK. This is the ACK listener, and this is the disconnect event and all of that. So remember, in WebSocket, as I've explained before, .emit means you are sending. .on means that you are listening, right? You're listening for it. So this applies to both the server and the client. The client can emit an event to the server, and the client can also listen to an event from the server. Same thing applies to the server. The server can emit an event to the client, and the server can listen for an event coming from the client. I hope that makes sense, right? So it's actually two-way bidirectional communication. That's what WebSocket is, right? So if we have all of this, we can be able to do our whole processing. So I'm going to go quickly to show you guys some of the components that we have, especially on the server side. So you can see we have the ACK, and what we are taking here from the payload, we have a sequence number, and then we're just checking. These are just basic validations to make sure that the sequence number is not less than 1 and it's actually a number, right? Remember I was saying that keep your sequence numeric, and if you can, make it as incremental as possible. In here, we have the socket or emit event, and we are emitting an error event here, and it takes in a message, and you can see and it means it's invalid in case you're doing something outside of the hook. Right. So if we are listening for acknowledgement, what we normally do is that we record it. So we await here and then we record the ACK. So record the ACK, we are just basically, let me show you, I have a quick session service here. And when we are recording the ACK, we are making a direct find one and update, right, to MongoDB. So basically, find one and then we update it with the acknowledgement, right? So basically, if I show you guys how this thing is in the DB side of things, I think I should show you. It's very important. So these are the two models that we have. We have the client ACK model here, and this is how the schema looks like. It takes in the client ID, which is a string, and obviously unique. We take in real life, you might want to be using the user ID, right? Not really client ID. You don't care about that really. Right. So we have the ask sequence. These are the question sequence that have been asked, right? So it's a number. The last sequence here is actually a number as well, right? So updated at good. So question. Look at the way the question look like. It has this, remember our questions have a sequence, right? And the sequence is meant to be unique, right here. So we have the text of the question that you want to ask, the options you want to ask for the question, the correct answer of the question if you want to save that, and the created at, right? So this one you can use it later on to say, okay, you want to mark the question, the responses, and all of that, right? So this is exactly how the models look like. So let's go back to our logic. So the find one update client acknowledgement basically just get the client by the ID and then it updates it. It updates the ask sequence to the array. It adds into to the set. Basically it's set so you don't repeat the entries. The maximum, it basically you do the at maximum basically gives you like the maximum value of the sequence, and then you put it save there. So you set like the last updated as so now, right? And also true. Nice. So basically we have all of those. It basically just records it, basically, right? So now let's talk about how it works on the front end, basically. So you go to app here, and this is the admin where we're sending the question. So this is the page. So here you can see this is where we are creating the question, right? So I'm going to go here. You see your button here, you submit. So when you submit your form, right? So we call the handle submit method. The handle submit method right here makes a request, right, to the slash questions endpoint. Remember the slash questions endpoint. So on the back end, let me show you how that looks like. Models, services, app, right? Let's go for our questions. Here we go. Slash questions endpoint. So basically, it takes in test options, correct answer. Let's go back to our page. It takes in test options. I believe option correct answers and all of that are basically optional, right? So it takes in all of this basically, and what happens is that it has the question. So if as it's adding the question, it comes here to emit the question. So io.emit emits the question to all of the clients. So let me show you the context of the IO. This is not emitting the question to a specific client, but rather all of the clients that are connected to our WebSocket. So IO is coming from the main WebSocket initialization app, right? From the create app that you have here, right? So you can see your IO here, which is what we've already set in the index.ts when we created the IO server. Let me show you here. This is the IO. This is where it's coming from, right? And as you can see, so whenever you want to make like a create app, we pass, obviously, we pass that. So let's go back here. So go to questions. And mainly you do that, you emit it to, to all of your clients, right? So mainly you do that, all of the clients basically gets to receive the questions, right? So let's talk about reconcile. How does reconcile work? This reconcile. So whenever a connection gets connected, we call this endpoint to reconcile. So like I explained, what it basically does is like it gets all the reconcile questions, basically. And remember, we're passing the client ID and the last sequence number, basically. Right. So when we have the last sequence, we pass that in. And these are the two parameters we pass over to the get reconcile questions. And it's going to use this to make a query from the MongoDB side of things, right? And say, okay, give me any other questions that is above or greater than the, than the ones that I have provided, the sequence number I've provided, right? So that will return all the sequence numbers to us. And then we want to get all the questions having those sequence numbers, right? So this is what we return back to the client. So the client will come here. Sorry about that. So the client will come here and just render it, right? And it gets sequence. Let me search for this quickly. It gets sequence. All right, fantastic. So here it just comes here to render it, right? So that's the whole concept. I hope I was able to like explain it technically, but then I think that's basically how it works. There's no complexities there. I added a bit of like a test cases that you guys might find useful, right? So you can go to server, you go to source, you see test. So API.test, just a basic test of every some of the endpoints that we have available. I think you can learn a few more things here. So I'll leave the link to this down below so you guys can play around it as well, right? So as you can see in our test, we're just using the Mongoose driver. So basically, undo a bunch of all of that, right? So I hope that makes sense, right? All right, let's do this. Let's do this on the next one. Bye, guys.